Then.
Hello, fellow Rebel Capitals. Hope you're well. I am here again with my good buddy Chris Irons from the QTR podcast, and we've got a lot to talk about. Warren Buffett is selling a lot of bank shares. What does that mean? What does he know that we don't know about potentially the global economy? And then we're going to get into possibly the largest scam in U.S. history. It's this Social Security shakedown from DOGE. And then we're going to get into Trump's new plan. He has a new one every day for these reciprocal tariffs. So first and foremost, Chris, thanks for coming on, buddy.
What is up? You know, it's very interesting to be in the background room there while you're like talking about what it is you want to talk about today. And you just kind of have this like low monotonous voice, and then with no warning at all, you're like, hello, rebel capitalists. I was like, I almost spilled my fucking drink. I was over here. I didn't even know we were starting.
That's funny. Yeah, I really, you got to do what you got to do. You know, you got to get the energy up. I say the best way to make content, you have to be authentic when you create content. You have to be yourself. But
Sure,
what you have to do is you have to turn yourself up to a 10. Like that's the secret. So anyway, getting into it, my friend, let's start by looking at a Barron's article that talks about what Warren Buffett is selling, a lot of banking shares. And, you know, you kind of think, well, what does he know that we don't know? And obviously there's a direct correlation between how well the banks do and how well the underlying economy is doing. So let's shoot over to this Barron's article. We've got title, Warren Buffett is out of step with markets.
You need to share your screen, George.
That's a bold statement right there. Here, let me do the screen share. You hear what this Barron's article is saying, Chris?
No, I just saw Josh pop up. I don't know where.
In his red glasses. Here you go. Warren Buffett is out of step with the market.
Yeah.
Berkshire Hathaway keeps selling stuff. I mean, that's I don't know.
First off, who the fuck is Andrew Barry, right? Okay, that's number one. All right, to be in here. And this is coming from somebody that talked shit about Warren Buffett at one point. I did a presentation on it because the point was he's just riding the Keynesian wave higher, you know, and he's had this great, you know, Warren Buffett's a shark, okay?
Yeah.
When companies are in distress, he steps in like he did with Bank of America. He does some type of convertible preferred deal. He lends his name to usually what is a brand that needs the brand equity. Yep. It in and of itself becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. He's able to revive whatever the company is under the guise of this never bet against America thing that he always talks about, which is fine. You know, he's a very shrewd, very smart investor. I've heard stories about him that are at odds with the wholesome Coca-Cola drinking, McDonald's eating, modest Omaha, guy that lives in the same house. Yeah. But I think you have to be a little bit of a shark to be such a great investor. So Warren Buffett's name I recognize. Andrew Barry's name I don't recognize. And by the way, being out of step with markets isn't the worst thing in the world. I mean, Buffett is often quoted as, you want to be greedy when others are fearful and fearful when others are greedy. The market is at pornographic valuations right now. And so I think it's great to see him selling stocks. I pulled up just now Bank of America because I think that's what we're talking about. I was looking at JP Morgan yesterday just for my own edification. Yeah. And Bank of America is trading at 1.3 times book, which, you know, is not a deep value situation for a banking stock. Lest we forget, I think he's still sitting on preferreds and shares that he started accumulating in 2008. So it's not as though he's pulling the old pump and dump here. I think he's got 17 years of holding this stock. I was looking at JP Morgan the other day because Jamie Dimon went on that great rant about, you know, people coming back into the office versus working from home. And the first thing I thought about after I heard that was, damn, this is a guy I'd like to invest in. I always liked Jamie Dimon, always liked JP Morgan, always liked Goldman Sachs as banking names. But JP Morgan is now at like 2.3 times book, which is a perverse valuation for a bank. That's a very
aggressive. Is it pornographic levels?
it's perverse. It's not pornographic, but it is. That is an aggressive valuation for a banking stock. And so I don't know how ripe the banking sector is. I think the good news for the banking sector, and I was saying this coming out of COVID when everything got walloped in March of 2020, probably said it on your podcast at one point. But as long as the Fed continues to print, and that is basically our entire monetary policy, ad infinitum, the banks are not going to collapse. The dollar's purchasing power may collapse, but on a nominal basis, the banks are always going to be solvent and they're always going to be around. And so back then, I thought banks were a good play because a lot of people were thinking, oh, is COVID going to become some systemic risk? And you saw how the Fed alleviated that. They created a ton of inflation, but there was no pressure on financials, and financials ripped since March of 2020. So case in point, put a bow on it. I think Buffett selling Bank of America now should not be some huge headline. And you can't say he's at odds with markets until 10 years from now, and you see whether or not. I saw you just had the market cap to GDP, the Buffett indicator, which is like,
Josh, do a screen share here. I've got the Buffett indicator up, and it's at all-time highs. Bottom line.
Right. So sell everything. There's nothing out of step with why? Because he's not buying fart coin. He's out of step with markets. He's not buying the latest pump and dump fucking crypto scam. He's Warren Buffett. I think he knows what the fuck he's doing. Love him or hate him. Thank you very much.
And then I think you have to ask why. Why is he selling? It's not because he needs any dry powder, because he's sitting on the biggest cash position I think that he's ever had.
It's valuations.
Just strictly valuations. That's it.
Well, what do you think? You think he notices something in Bank of America's balance sheet or the bank's collective balance sheets that everybody else hasn't noticed?
The banks collectively, because he's not only selling B of A, but he's selling several other banks that he owns, notably a Brazilian bank. So I don't know. I'm just asking the question. It seems like, if you're Warren Buffett, you're going to get insider information that the rest of us, the normies, don't have. And I'm not saying it's illegal insider information. It's just you got Jamie Dimon on speed dial, and you've got all these bank CEOs on speed dial, and they're going to tell you something probably a lot different than they tell the mainstream media. And so is that potentially why he's selling? Because those bankers have kind of insider intel on their own as to what's happening in the real economy, because they're the ones that are doing the lending. They're the ones that have the accounts and whatnot. And maybe they're telling him, hey, things don't look good. We see a potential downturn here, especially if we have tariffs or we have all these global supply chains continuing to be disrupted. We see the contraction in China. We see the contraction in Europe, in the UK, in Canada, and globally, liquidity is tight. It's very, very tight.
You don't need to call Jamie Dimon to know that the economy is slowing down.
Yeah, but again, you get it, right? Maybe he has further insight.
Kind of. If I had to guess, I would say it's just valuations at this point. He may have some additional insight. I don't know. I'm just spitballing here. I mean, to me, I feel like the fact that the economy is slowing down is like a big open secret that nobody's talking about. But it's not like I need somebody in a dark, shadowy room to explain that to me. I see it in the credit card delinquencies. I see it in the auto delinquencies. I see it in real rates. I see it in spending contracting and in the home buyers I was looking at today. So, to me, it's pretty obvious, we're heading towards stagflation. I don't know. On the other hand, if you're Brian Moynihan, who's the CEO of, I think that's his name, the CEO of Bank of America, I mean, what do you I don't know. What are you going to tell Buffett that's going to prompt him to sell your stock? That's just.
I have no idea.
I have no idea either.
I have no idea. I know. Let me give you an example. When I talked to Kenny McElroy, he runs a fund with maybe 1.5 billion, something like that. And if I'm having dinner with him, he'll tell me, he'll shoot me straight exactly what he's seeing with rents, exactly what he's seeing with this and that. And a lot of time that's not what you're hearing, let's just say in the mainstream media, because he really has his finger on the pulse of what's happening, boots on the ground. So just an idea. I don't
For
really
sure.
have an opinion one way or the other.
I'm sure that people like Buffett have access to channel checks in places that the mainstream media doesn't cover. But I mean, an investor like Buffett isn't relying on the mainstream media to make his investment decisions to begin with.
Yeah,
I
but
mean,
that's kind of my point. I always look at it through the lens of, we'll call it the cerveza sickness. And the yield curve inverted in August of 2019. And
you think that was telegraphing something?
I mean, if you look at all that happened right around August of 2019, just prior to their military games, I think, something like that. And so, I mean, just trying to think about how things work in the real world. If you're that lab guy, that scientist, and you're like, oh shit, I dropped it. That's not good.
Quick, open my E-Trade account and buy puts on the whole universe.
yeah. But what's he like?
Oh shit, I dropped it. Fucking understatement of the century.
But let's just assume that happened for a moment. And I don't know how it works in China, but I'm guessing what he would have to do with their communist structure and the CCP is he'd have to call his local government official and tell him what happened. And then he would call, kind of go up the chain of command. And then somewhere along that chain of command, I'm guessing that government official would know would know someone in the banking system. Right. And say, hey, just FYI, let's go to dinner tomorrow night. There's some information that you need.
For sure.
And, this is probably going to be a minor thing, but we were developing this virus and this bioweapon, let's say, and, the scientists actually accidentally spilled it outside. And, it's probably nothing, but just so you know, this could potentially be a black swan event. And then what he does is he gets on the phone with his buddies at JP Morgan. And then JP Morgan gets on the phone with Paul Tudor Jones. And then Paul Tudor Jones, like, thanks for the intel, I'm going to send one of my research analysts out to China to meet with this guy directly, because I want the lowdown here. I want the probabilities straight from the horse's mouth. So then he goes out to the scientist. The scientist talks to him about the bioweapon that he was working on. And then he gets on the phone with Paul Tudor Jones. And he's like, dude, this could be a problem. This could be a real big problem. So then what Paul Tudor Jones does, just to hedge out his portfolio, is he buys along into the curve. And that's what inverts it.
Right. Yeah, that must have been a moment, huh? When he dropped that fucking thing. It was a woman, by the way. The Bat Lady was her nickname. But
really?
There must have been a good 30 seconds there after that fucking vial broke where she was just like, ooh.
Yeah.
This could be bad, Do I kill myself now or do I wait for the government to kill me? That would be the first question that came across my mind.
Yeah, but I know that's kind of I don't know that it really is a far-fetched story.
That's what fucking happened, basically.
Yeah.
I mean, and fuck Paul Tudor Jones. All you had to do was listen to me and you. We were talking about it as soon as they announced the first 12 cases in China. I know Chris Martenson was on it early too. And I just kept watching that number tick up from double digits, triple digits. And I'm like, hey, who's watching? That's why there is, I understand that information does travel amongst the elites quicker than most people.
That's kind of my point.
And you're 100% right. Having said that, there is then another buffer zone where most semi-conscious catatonic investors, even people that are not just retail, but people on the buy side, people on the sell side, are just kind of wandering in between steakhouses in New York City, enjoying their martinis and thinking about, whatever the next Rolex they want to buy. And they're not paying attention to anything. And that's why there's always been a great information arbitrage in markets still, using us and COVID as an example as one, but also too, you look at things I know people that focus on information arbitrage. So microcap investors, like my buddy Maj Soydan, who is just constantly looking for companies that aren't covered, that people aren't paying attention to. And there's thousands of them. You have all the activist short sellers out there that are just constantly pointing out fraud that's out in the open that nobody seems to either want to talk about or acknowledge. And so the market isn't so efficient that you need an inside track. You just got to have your fucking head screwed on straight,
Yeah.
in my opinion.
Yeah. And I also want to point out for the audience, the reason I'm using Paul Tudor Jones as an example is because he was interviewed at the World Economic Forum in January, I think it was mid-January of 2020. And he was really like sounding the alarm.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, I remember I used that clip on several of my whiteboard videos at the time. And
it just never happens when you think it's going to happen. You know, like it's been very clear over the last year or two, at least in my opinion, that we're heading for an economic wreck. Something is going to break. There's going to be a blow off valve somewhere. I don't know if it's going to be in the gold market. I don't know if it's going to be in the bond market. I don't know if it's going to be in equities getting killed. Something's going to have to blow off at some point because there's too much pressure building up inside of the economic system here as a result of what I think is where rates are. We put it off a little bit because of all the extra COVID liquidity in the system. But I think that Paul Tudor Jones is right. And I think I'm right. And I think it's just a question of getting the timing down, as it always is.
Yeah. I put out a tweet the other day, and I don't know a lot of people have connected these dots, because I know so many people that would consider themselves Austrians or, sound money people in the gold space or the Bitcoin space that are very bullish on the U.S. economy. And they say, oh, George and Chris, you guys are just fear mongering. There's 99% chance that the economy booms in 2025. The stock market's going to go up by 40%. We're never going to have a recession again. We avoided the recession. Just, quit the doom and gloom. Just sit back, enjoy your cocktail and watch the whole economy grow from here. That's kind of their argument.
Well, and my argument is fuck you, because honestly, if you're a long only investor and you think that you and I and all these other people who I know are genuinely concerned, a lot of the Austrian thinkers that I know are genuinely concerned. They genuinely think things are out of control. It's not some gimmick. It's not some bullshit. I know people that write newsletters, they get, made fun of all the time. Like, oh, how are you going to sell if you can't monger fear? Look, it's like people talk about Peter Schiff all the time. Like, hey, well, he's selling gold, so he's got to say that. It's like he started a gold company because of his views on the economy. Right. Yep. He didn't have his views on the economy predetermined by owning a gold company. It was the other way around. Yeah, and so there's a lot of Austrian
Peter pretty people, well, and I can confirm that for sure.
100%. So do I, 100%. And so the point is, like, if we're not out there expressing some type of genuine concern, what is it going to be? It's going to be a Tom Lee fucking CNBC fuckfest at the shit factory every day. I'm going to listen to Kathy Wood talking about completely unattainable price targets that are beyond the stratosphere while she sells stock. I mean, putting $4,000 price targets on Tesla while her ETF is selling it. Can anybody tell me how that's any different from what the DOJ just fucking indicted Andrew Leff for? Because I can't find any difference between the two of those things. So regardless, I think that if you don't have people out there, and if you're on the long side and people are out there like manipulating the market by fear mongering, like that's what you should want. Be like, great, drive prices down. I'm a buyer at any price. Like, my question is, why do you people take such fucking offense to people coming out and raising what are really rational points of caution, rational objections? I wrote a blog piece the other day just saying, hey, the crypto space is rife with a little, with garbage everywhere. Everyone is worshiping something called Fartcoin. Like, maybe we should look around here a little bit. And like the first response was like, I can't stand all this FUD about Bitcoin. It's like, first off, that's not what I was saying. Like, we are psychologically, we have been conditioned to believe that the market is something that it isn't, and the economy works in a way that it doesn't. And you got, look, I'm not telling anybody to do anything. If you want to go long the market right now with leverage, more power to you. I salute you. Fucking wave your flag, and I support whatever it's for. I'm not out there telling people how to invest. I don't give financial advice. All I'm doing is expressing concerns about things that just look a little fucky. And like, That's it. If you can't handle that, you should be looking inward, because I can sit here and listen to Tom Lee and say, hey, man, you had a great track record because last year when I was making fun of you, the market ripped and you got it right on your target and I was wrong. And you know what? Like, I'm happy for you. And maybe I should have listened more to what you have to say. And I got to look inside myself to see like what the problem is there. And people that have a problem with people like you, George, should be asking themselves the same thing. Like, is my problem with George Gammon, or is my problem that I don't like when people fucking press on the nerve center of my cognitive dissonance? And I think probably the latter, which is why, as you can tell by my necklaces, my recommendation is going to South America and eating a bunch of mushrooms and seeing if you can rearrange your neural plasticity a little bit to try and take in the viewpoints of other people, not just on markets, but on everything.
Okay. So a couple things here. I always, and this is an open-ended question. I don't know that I have the answer. Are you right if you're right for the wrong reasons? I guess the P&L is the be all end all, and that would say yes. But I always wonder, if you say that you should go long the stock market because some sort of astrological sign, because of Aquarius, the Uranus is in the moons of Jupiter or something like that, and the market goes up, are you right? I mean, kind of no.
I mean, if the P&L is your scorecard, I mean, how many idiots did I watch make 100 million times more money than I did on crypto and
but it's an interesting question. I don't really know the answer, but another thing too, as far as connecting those dots, that if you're someone in the Austrian or sound money space and you're like, yes, we avoided a recession and the economy is going to continue to grow from here. What you are also saying, and this is where I don't think a lot of people have really thought this one through, is you're saying that Keynesian economics works.
Right.
Because what we did is we shut down the entire global economy, which would include the United States economy. We locked everyone in a cage. The government did. We didn't. And then they just gave everyone, quote unquote, free money. And you had all of this fiscal spending, which is Keynesian. That is the foundation of Keynesian economics and how to smooth out the business cycle. So if you believe that we are going to avoid a recession after locking everyone in a cage for 2 years and just giving out free money and completely destroying the economy, then you also must believe in Keynesian economics. And I don't know that most of the sound money guys who are bullish have thought that one through.
And that's the problem, right? Like the problem is that I don't believe that like Keynesian economics makes sense to me. It just doesn't. Mathematically, logically, it's never made sense to me. It always seems like it has to end somewhere.
And another thing too, Chris, is if the economy is booming and if we will never ever see a recession, and if we avoided a recession during the cerveza sickness, then why don't we just do this every other year?
Right. And why don't we just print money?
And no one has to work. Let's not produce any goods and services. Let's just give everyone stimmy checks.
Well, we can't do that.
Then let's just not produce anything. Why go back to work and we're all going to get rich?
Right.
Why isn't this just an economic policy on a moving forward basis?
And why are we like obsessed with, bringing in $3 trillion a year in tax receipts when we can just print the money? That's that you're going down the moral hazard Keynesian highway a little bit further. And it begs all those questions. And so you have to believe that we just got to, Keynesian economics and modern monetary theory works, but there's this line that we have to walk. And essentially people like myself argue that it doesn't work, and we're going to find out. And by the way, the Keynesian experiment here, really the QE MMT kind of in hyperdrive experiment here has been going on really for since we came off the gold standard, we'll say, so maybe 50 years. That's not a lot of time for, this ethos to kind of work its way through the entire global economy. You can do a lot of damage before something breaks. And so maybe it'll be 50 years from now or 100 years from now. But look, I mean, you look back at history, you look at the fall of the Roman Empire, you look at what they did with their currency. I mean, it's just it's like we said a week ago, you're walking down the path and the path just gets narrower and narrower. And one day you look up and there's no path, the path isn't there.
So,
and so
I don't really agree too much on the monetary stuff, but we could save that topic for another video. But one thing I would like to say is it's very rare that I make predictions on, what's going to happen. What I try to do with pretty much most of my whiteboards, especially, is I just try to get people to think. It's really all I'm trying to do. Is that's why I always say there's no certainties, there's only probabilities. And what I'm trying to do, because you get so much bullish information from CNBC and the mainstream media, is we've got a dam in front of us and we've got several cracks in the dam. Now, just because the dam hasn't burst doesn't mean that the cracks aren't there. And what I'm trying to do with a lot of my videos is just point out and say, hey guys, look, there's a crack that we definitely have to pay attention to. And that's something that you need to include into your analysis of the probabilities of what the outcomes may be in 2025 and beyond. But to sit there and completely ignore the cracks just because the dam hasn't broken, I think is just a very poor investment strategy.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay, so now let's go down and look at.
And we're not selling anything. I mean, I don't know. Maybe you are. I'm not selling anything. Like, I have a blog, but I'm not on here like, hey, you should subscribe, because I don't really give a fuck. I do it to be like cathartic and to write about the things that I like writing about. And the people that follow me feel either like-minded or they get some kind of value from it. And the people that don't. But like, I started a podcast in 2018 specifically because of how CNBC treated Bill Fleckenstein in a podcast where they had him on, where Tim Seymour ridiculed him for being long gold. And then all of a sudden I noticed Peter Schiff, who was the only other guy I liked listening to, stopped getting appearances on CNBC. And that was what started me to start a podcast. I was like, I want to talk to these guys. I find them more interesting than these other idiots on television. And there was no way to do it. So, like, I started the podcast as a function of that. I didn't wake up one morning and be like, oh, I want to be Mr. fucking Finance Guy. I want to wear a suit every day and a Patagonia vest and, have 3 martini lunches. Like, no, like, it just wasn't out there. And so even the stuff that we talk about right now, it's just not out there. There's a couple of good podcasts out there, but like, there's not enough of it, not enough to be an effective, like, balance. Like 30% of financial media content should come from an Austrian perspective, in my opinion, or it should be like bearish, Austrian, skeptical, cynical, short side, whatever, to offer up some balance. But it's like 3% of everything on financial television. And that's it.
And the irony too is if I, a lot of people accuse me of just throwing out something that might seem controversial, like the Fed's balance sheet doesn't matter or something like that, just because I'm trying to get engagement. And I'm like, look, dude, first of all, you've got 50 subscribers or you've got 10 followers. What do you know about engagement? And secondly, if you did know something about engagement, you would know that I do the opposite of what I should do. What I should do is, I know Schiff doesn't try to do this, but he falls into this category just inadvertently. And Saylor's the exact same way, is you just pick a message and you talk about that message every single day. Right. And your view never, ever changes and you never question your view. And that's how you build a following. That's how you get a lot of subscribers. And that's how you're able to monetize a YouTube channel or a podcast the best way. The worst way to do it is sit there and try to poke holes in theories and question your own beliefs and, try to do all these things. It's just, I always, one of the best quotes I ever heard about content creation is from my buddy, Rich Cooper. And he said, people don't want to hear your opinion. They want to hear their opinion come out of your mouth.
100%.
And you just do that over and over and over and over again to where every single day, what George is going to say. He's going to say, Trump is awesome. He's going to say, buy gold. And he's going to say, buy Bitcoin because they're all going to $1 million and the dollar is going to hyperinflate. And if I just said that on every single podcast, on every single video, I'd have 1 million subscribers.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Anyway.
And you have to have the courage to change your opinion when it changes. And I've done that. I've done that on Bitcoin. I've done that on a bunch of
Oh,
things.
I did
And
that on the whole banking system. I was someone that really thought the Fed's balance sheet mattered and quantitative easing and all that when I first started. And then the more research I did, I had to sit back and question that and say, well, wait a minute. If this is true, then this doesn't line up with what I'm seeing in the research. And then you just have to kind of go through that process. And when you realize that you didn't see things correctly, then you just move on with a different framework. And it's just, anyway. All right. So now let's go over, this DOGE thing. This was bananas. This is crazy. So I don't know if you saw this, Chris, but here we go. Here is this spreadsheet that I think Musk did himself, or, the DOGE guys and gals did it. But this is an account of all the people that are in the Social Security system that are not yet dead, I guess, or pronounced as dead. So they've got like probably a tab there, for those of you.
What does it say? Scroll up.
According to the Social Security database, these are the numbers of people
With
in
the death
each
field
age
set to
bucket.
false. Okay.
The death field set as false. So if you know how a spreadsheet works, QuickBooks,
Right.
Excel, then you realize that probably over here, it had death. I guess it's false or true. I don't know how that really works, but bottom line is it was set to all of these people being alive. So
Right.
now, were they being paid? We don't know. That's an open question. But the fact that you have people that are listed at 360 years old that haven't yet been categorized as dead leads you to believe that there's probably some errors going on here, and there most likely are a lot of people, potentially millions and millions of people, that are receiving Social Security payments that shouldn't, right? And I told the story quickly on Twitter, Chris, where I used to spend quite a bit of time in 2017 in Nogales on the Mexican side. That's one of those border towns like Tijuana. And a lot of the people that I spoke with, they would sit there and tell me about how they had some sort of benefits from the United States, like welfare benefits is what I kind of assumed them to be. And they told me that they hadn't been back to the States in years.
Right.
Like, oh yeah, I haven't been back to the States in 5, 6, 7 years. But I still get free money every single month. And I'm like, how? I mean, you don't have to tell me the details, but how does that one work out? And so when I saw this, I'm like, maybe that's what it is, because a lot of people assumed that this could be, well, it's not just illegal immigrants, but a lot of people that are making up false Social Security numbers and being like a false person that maybe would have passed away. And then I don't know how you'd work the system, but bottom line, you're getting their Social Security payments because the government doesn't know they're dead, or it's a fake number, what have you. But I know definitively that there are people probably all over the world that are receiving payments from the United States government that haven't stepped foot in the United States for 10 years and definitely don't qualify.
Sure. Well, anytime you have a program that is, just set up to spray cash, you're going to have tons of waste, fraud, and abuse. It's like PPP stuff, like Peter Schiff said it on his podcast.
Good point.
I remember where I was on a run. I was in Skippack, Pennsylvania. I was running down Skippack Pike, and I was listening to his podcast when he was talking about the PPP program, which hadn't even been implemented yet. And what he said was it is going to incentivize a enormous amount of waste, fraud, and abuse. And if he was, of course, 100% right. And it's money that even if we spent the next 5 years trying to claw it all back, we won't get to all of it. And I'm sure the same is true for the Social Security Administration, which is really, the people's PPP that everybody has kind of known about. And so the number of loopholes and ways that people con the Social Security Administration for benefits that they don't deserve. Anybody that lives in a city. I told this story actually about the PPP stuff, but I met a woman who was a cook at an Applebee's while COVID was going on, I was up in Bensalem at the Applebee's on Street Road, and it was either Applebee's or Fridays, but regardless, I met the woman who had just gotten off her shift, who was like a line cook, and I was just shooting the breeze with her. And she told me that she got, some $15,000 check from the PPP thing. And I was like, how did you get that? And she's like, oh, you just like apply for it. It's free money or whatever. And I'm thinking like, well, do you work full time? She's like, yeah, I work full time. She's like, this is just money I'm just like putting away. Like she didn't get fired or laid off or anything. So I was like, well, how is it possible that you do that? She's like, everybody in my neighborhood's done it. So the point is, anybody that's ever lived in an urban area, in an urban setting, knows that the SSA gets taken advantage of. Everybody knows every day you see a new like PPP fraud that's come up. Somebody that supposedly has an LLC that like,
they know how to work the system.
100%. And so, and then you combine that with the fact that government employees are in no way incentivized to be efficient because there's no profit motive. And so this is why, when you walk into the DMV, the service is always terrible and lethargic, and why Amtrak fucking sucks. That was another thing I wanted to rant about. I was on Amtrak yesterday and it was just like, just horrific. I mean, I paid $200 for a business class seat, and like, I was just sitting in like garbage, and like everything was broken, and like, so when there's no profit motive, look at the MTA, right? Look at SEPTA. When there's no profit motive and the government continues to bail you out, or it's giving away free cash, the quality is always going to suffer. And so does it surprise me that there's, 5 million people listed at the age of over 110? Not really. Are most of them probably like in there for nefarious reasons or erroneous reasons? Probably. But I also think it's important to understand that when you're dealing with spreadsheets and you're dealing with numbers, and specifically when you're dealing with computer programming, that there can be reasons for things that look to be numerical anomalies when they are in fact not numerical anomalies. And that's also important to keep in mind as, this data is kind of handed to us and presented to us as like,
we don't know definitively what's going on here because none of us have access to the data. I'm just trying.
We have a screenshot of 2 columns of an Excel spreadsheet with no provenance, you know what I mean? And no nothing. So just take that for what it is.
Yeah, I think but everyone has to come to their own conclusions on what the probabilities are. And based on how inefficient we know the government is, if this was correct, it would not surprise me. Meaning,
not at all. Yeah, it would not surprise
me.
What
DOGE is revealing, that would not
if
surprise
somebody
me.
aged
my base
300 years old was getting Social Security benefits, it would not surprise me.
Yeah, that's right. So now let's go over to Trump. Oh, one thing that I was talking to Gerald Celente about yesterday, and regardless of what comes as a result of DOGE and the Social Security and the US aid and whatnot, I think one of the huge benefits is it's really opening up the eyes of the average Joe and Jane. Because before they were like, yeah, okay, Chris, you sit there and talk about how the government is inefficient, but what are you going to do? They have this idea that, number one, I don't have time to think about it. I don't have time to change it. I don't have the power to change it. And number two, it's, there might be some bad apples in the government, but at the end of the day, it's just good people doing hard, honest work. And the government as an overall apparatus is kind of a benign entity that is trying to look out for the people of the United States. That's kind of their view. And even if they're not, I don't really have time to think about it because I got to take my kid to school. We've got to go to the lake this weekend. My wife and I are having marital problems, so I just don't have any mental bandwidth to allocate to this. And I think that's, the category that most of Americans fall into on the right and left. But now that they're seeing this just, headline news every single day, they've got to ask themselves, and I'm sure they're having that mental dialogue. We're like, you know what? I listened to a Peter Schiff video 5 years ago where he was talking about this, and I kind of blew it off. But okay, now this is just so egregious that it's like front and center to where people have to start thinking about it, and it's opening up their eyes as to how inefficient the government actually is. And then they start to realize, oh yeah, Peter Schiff, Doug Casey, Tom Woods, all these guys, Ron Paul, that have been talking about reducing the size of government, maybe they had a point.
Yeah, and you can say what you want about DOGE. You can say it's, a scam, or they're just kind of going over the surface level shit, or they're kind of moving fast and breaking things. And there's plenty of things that I could criticize about the way the whole DOGE thing is happening. But I'm actually in the middle of writing a blog post about this.
Okay.
And my point is that DOGE is what we deserve. It's like the Rolling Stones. You don't get what you want, you get what you need. Well, what do we need? Well, you know what? Like, what are we reaping from what we have sown? Well, what have we sown? We've sown decades of like lying to the American people, being completely wasteful with our spending, trillions of dollars missing at the Pentagon, one headline after the other about, tens of billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars leaving the country that could be used on shit like Amtrak, or like to house homeless veterans, stuff that we could turn around and use back here in the States for good, while the government shakes down taxi drivers who are making $600 on Venmo for their taxes.
Yeah.
And
to
so,
be fair, and the American people being relatively complacent.
100%. And so DOGE is what we get, right? We get enough pent up frustration from most American citizens who may not be able to articulate a nuanced way which we should audit the government, but are pissed off enough to understand that, money is fucking flying out the door everywhere while the nation goes deeper and deeper into debt. And we seem completely unable to balance our own checkbook as a country and run any kind of surplus. The Biden administration was just like, basically just said fucking YOLO, and like, we're going to spend even more. Like, to the best of my understanding, their fiscal strategy was everything is already fucked. We might as well make it way, way worse, because we're going to be out of here soon, and just kind of like get the shit off our plate. And I said that about the last couple of Fed chairs too, although I give Powell some credit. So what's the point? The point is that like you reap what you sow, and we reaped a bunch of careless spending. We reaped we sowed a bunch of careless spending, a bunch of lying to the American people about, you name it, COVID, fucking vaccines, Hunter Biden laptop, throw a dart. We are sowing hundreds of billions of dollars out of the country for foreign aid. We are sowing cleaning up San Francisco for when Xi Jinping comes, but not for the American people. Yeah, right. We are sowing getting the veterans off the street when the fucking CCP shows up, but not any other day of the week. And so what we reap from that is this fucking chaos, whirlwind, Tasmanian devil of an organization just going through the fucking books. You know what I mean? A bunch of 19-year-olds named Big Balls, these fucking Mohawk freaks of nature, whatever they are, just taking the papers and throwing them in the air. Like, and to some degree, that's very alarming to me, because like, I don't want 19-year-olds named Big Balls to have access to the Social Security database or everybody's Social Security numbers. Like, that is very alarming to me. And on the other hand, I'm like, well, this is what we get. And to be honest with you, I'd rather see fucking chaos in these organizations than see 4 more years of accelerating debt and a larger deficit, because at least I know in 2 years when midterms come around, or even maybe sooner if the Democrats use the judiciary, but at some point the chaos will slow down a little bit, and people are going to look back and say, all right, let's put this shit back together, but let's be mindful of what happened last time and all this stuff, because there's a certain amount of fraud, waste, and abuse that can be uncovered and unearthed that will make all of this worth it. And it's there. The question is just finding it and presenting it to the American people. It's like this shit about auditing fucking Fort Knox for the gold. There's part of me that doesn't want to know, because do I think that it is possible that we have used all loopholes available at our disposal and have at some point, double spent the gold in that vault, or that it hasn't been there for 30 years? Yes, I think it's possible. Do I want to know? Not really. Maybe after tomorrow, because I have plans for dinner, or something like that. It's kind of an uncomfortable thing. But on the other hand, the other part of me is like, yeah, bust the fucking vault open and let's see who's holding what here, because the river's been dealt. The last round of betting's come around, and let's see if everybody's holding what they say they're holding. And by the way, there'll be plenty of blame to go around if they're not. And we could turn around and say, all right, well, when did we get off the course here? And so I think we need this transparency. I watched Rand Paul this morning on Fox News coming out talking about auditing Fort Knox. And I think it was Zero Hedge that prompted this whole thing. They put out a tweet and then Musk responded to it. Now, listen, do I think that, he's the most qualified person in the world to be in there, fucking around in Fort Knox, and that he should have access to our gold reserves if they're there? No, not particularly. On the other hand, does my curiosity to know whether or not that shit is actually there override any of those concerns? Yeah, it kind of does. So DOGE is the chaos that we deserve.
Yeah. Well said. I think in terms of them having access to our Social Security records and information, I don't know that I trust them with it, but I trust the government less with it. So it's kind of like, look, if the government already has it, they're the people I really don't trust. So the fact that DOGE has it, well, it kind of is what it is there. And I think on net balance, it's a positive. As far as the Fort Knox deal, I think what would be good about that is, assuming that there's not what they say, then it shines light on the corruption, for lack of a better word, within the United States government, and the ruse, the grift, the lies that they are willingly telling the American people. And it shines a light on that for the average Joe and Jane, because I don't really think it's a big deal if, let's say they say there's $6 trillion of the gold and there's only 4. It's right. Like, okay, so as far as the assets on our balance sheet, as far as the United States, does that really move the needle? Probably not. I mean, we don't have very many assets. I mean, we're massive. We have massive negative equity as it is. So that doesn't really matter too much. The whole country's bankrupt. But the more so, it's just making the American people realize that they have been duped and they have been lied to, and they have every right to be pissed off. There was that meme going around prior to Trump being elected, that you don't hate the media enough. Remember that one where, they would
see it every day.
Yeah. They'd show a blatant lie that CNN said. And the meme was, you don't hate the media enough. And I always said, well, you don't hate the government enough. Trust me. And I think we should make a meme every single time that DOGE reveals something, every time they audit the Fort Knox and there's not enough gold there, that once again reveals them lying to the American people. You don't hate the government enough.
Yeah.
All right. So quickly.
Next question.
Yeah. Quickly.
I'm just reading the comments here. People think I'm on drugs, which is funny because I'm not. I'm actually 85 days alcohol free today, believe it or not.
Congratulations, buddy.
Thank you. Actually, today's 86.
Good for you. Okay, well, let's move on to the tariffs. Josh, were you able to pull up that tweet real quick? Here we go. Can you zoom in on that or just click it?
Yeah.
Josh looks like Mitch Hedberg.
Okay.
You don't know who Mitch Hedberg is?
Josh is 22.
With the glasses, he looks just like him. The comedian.
Yeah. Okay, so Chris, I'd like to get your opinion on this. Trump basically here says, on trade, I've decided the purpose of it. Oh, man, I can barely read that. It's so small. For purposes of fairness, I will
charge a reciprocal tariff, meaning whatever countries charge the United States of America, we will charge them, no more, no less.
Right. So my question there is, I think this is at odds with kind of what he was saying, which I guess is no surprise. But the tariffs to me were sold. One of the ways they were sold to the American people was it would level the playing field with China, not because China has tariffs on the United States, although they might, but because that's the only way that we can compete with them because of their low labor costs, because they have no environmental standards or very few environmental standards. They are a currency manipulator, all of these things. And this isn't my argument. This was the argument. And therefore, in order to level the playing field, we've got to implement tariffs. So that gives our manufacturing base the ability to compete with all of these manufacturers in China. So if we're just doing the reciprocal tariffs, I don't know how that makes up for the low wages, for the currency manipulation, and for the low environmental standards, number one. But maybe what he's saying, and I don't know, is that he's doing this as a baseline tariff, and then he's going to add more tariffs just where he sees fit on top of the reciprocal tariffs. But that, by his definition, then that wouldn't be fair. So I'm just, again, I'm not saying it's right or wrong or anything like that.
I guarantee you,
figure out the rationale there.
I guarantee there is no rationale. The rationale is fuck me, fuck you. That's the rationale. Like that's probably about the 4 seconds of thinking that went on in Trump's head when he came up with that. He did not go down that whole line of logic that you just went down. Fuck me, tariffs me, fuck you, tariffs you. That's it. What's that? It's my policy. Write it down somewhere, get it out there in a tweet immediately. Sir, we're going to have to use different words. Fine.
I know that you are in contact with a lot of hedge fund managers, a lot of guys on Wall Street, and a lot of money managers. How are they using game theory to try to figure out what on earth Trump is going to do in a way to set up your portfolio in a prudent fashion? I don't. There's so many unknowns, and I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I mean, this is one of the things that I think makes him an effective negotiator, is you just don't know what the hell he's going to say. He could say something completely different the next day. It's a bull in the china shop type of approach. But if you're managing money or even your own portfolio, I mean, how do you figure out, or how do you come to a conclusion as to what may play out?
Yeah, I really don't know. I haven't spoke to anybody specifically about trying to map out what the effects of tariffs are going to be. But I don't know how you could even begin down the road of the game theory of it when Trump can change his mind very quickly. And so he tweets one thing one day and, a different thing the next day. And, whether or not he's playing 4D chess or just the fuck me, fuck you game remains to be seen. But, in terms of trying to handicap what his next decision is and then extrapolating that over like what the markets are going to do, I haven't talked to anybody about that. And listen, I do know a lot of hedge fund managers, but to be honest with you, I try not to talk to them because you know what? They're not that fucking interesting. And they're not that kind of people that like I would go out with, that I would like sit down. And I've had a beer with a couple of them, names you'd recognize, but like, they're just normal people. Some of them, they're not super interesting people. They're not like, it's funny to know some of the people that are constantly like, absolutely just adulated and like fawned over on CNBC because you meet them in person and they can't hold a conversation. They don't know which way is up. But there are some great people too, some normal people in the industry, like Carson from Muddy Waters is a great guy, and Jim Chanos is a great guy, and there's a couple of people that I actually like enjoy being around. But most of the names that you would probably recognize, they're not that interesting in real life. Many of them are obsessed with their work. Many of them, that's kind of the one thing that they are really good at. They're known for being a billionaire, or they're known for being, having this great success in X year or whatever. But, they can't put mustard on a hot dog correctly, So like in the world of trade-offs, I'll take my 390 square foot apartment and, be able to walk and chew gum at the same time. Thank you very much.
So the punchline there is next time you're going to the strip club, you're not going to invite Tom Lee.
I would definitely. I've never met Tom Lee. I gave Tom Lee a lot of shit because he is constantly bullish.
Yeah, maybe he's the opposite. Like I know some of the hedge fund guys too, and a lot of times what you see on TV or their persona,
sure,
project in real life, they're the complete opposite.
Sure, that's like Tyler Mathison from CNBC. Like met him in Vegas one year for like a conference. Fucking super chill dude. And Jerry and Brothers too, like great guys.
Yeah.
But yeah, you know, on TV, Tyler Mathison comes off as this stuffy like reporter or whatever. But you know, hanging out with him on the Vegas Strip was a different story. So you never know you never know what you're gonna get with some of these people.
You got it. Well, on that bombshell, guys, I want to encourage you to enjoy the rest of your afternoon. And as always, make sure you are standing up for freedom, liberty, free market capitalism. And you got to check out Chris's Substack. What is it, Chris?
It's called Fringe Finance. It's on Substack. QuoteTheRaven.substack.com. But
all right, cool. And we will see you on the next video.